Yes. We will have to overcome the challenges with microphones. Okay, a warm welcome once again to Benjijem Bergmanom, co-director of the film. Can you first explain this co-director part of the story? We've seen your brother introduce the film, excusing himself for not being here. Can you just tell us about who actually is behind this film, except for yourself, how it works?
I can try. Can you hear me without? Yeah. Okay. You need it for the stream. Okay. I'll just hold it here. Yeah. So I am the co-director and co-producer of the film. Jono and I, we do all our films together. It's kind of a brotherly thing. So should we try with that? Maybe we'll. Okay. Yeah, we do all of our films together. We co-direct, we co-produce our films, and he couldn't be here today because we actually had our first physical premiere in the United States yesterday at the Museum of Modern Art, where the film was shown. And so he went there and I came here.
Thank you. So this was, as you said, this was actually the first film the two of you did together?
It was the first film that we embarked on. So it was a very long journey. It was self-financed at the beginning. It was kind of the first project that we got into. So actually 2 films have come out before this film, but it was the first film that we actually started together. So it's not the first film that was distributed, but it's the first film that we kind of began doing together. So we really found our way as, you know, as brothers in this industry together with this film.
And it's such a big story, such a big character. And Bruce starts the film by saying, you tricked me into this.
Yes.
So how did you do that?
So yeah, I mean, it's a long story. So as you know, Bruce's projects kind of span a lifetime. But I actually started working with Bruce now 10 years ago. I was working as a creative director in an ad agency. I then moved to New York, where I was working in communications at the United Nations. And we were organizing this big panel of speakers, and we were thinking about different voices. And I knew of Bruce, and I knew that he had a very unique, kind of interesting perspective on things. And I thought this might be an interesting guy to come speak at the United Nations. So we brought him to the UN to speak, and that started on a kind of very long working relationship together with the United Nations as well. And we stayed in touch, and over and over again, we kind of asked him, do you want to do a documentary? Is this kind of interesting to you? Because what we found is that his message resonates kind of with a very, on a macro level, but also on a micro level, and also kind of for a very highbrow audience, if you will, but also for an audience that has nothing to do with design, that has never heard of design, that is not necessarily interested in art or architecture. So we just thought that he might be a subject that could be interesting for a wider audience. And so we asked him year after year, and it was kind of like, no, I don't think I'm ready, and I don't think I'm not interesting enough. Do you think you're interesting enough? And eventually we met up at a festival in the United States, and he was like, yeah, I mean, I'm working on this project in China now. It's probably going to be the biggest design exhibition of all times. I think maybe now is a good time. And we were like, yeah, I think now could be a good time to begin this journey. So that's kind of how it came to me.
And it took a long time, right? It was a few years of filming?
It was 4 years in total was production time. I think something like 4 years together with editing, getting it off the ground, financing, and stuff like that.
And in the film, you don't shy away from showing your presence, the two of you as directors.
Yeah.
And I kind of read it as this film is a collaboration between 3 artists. Was this how you intended it?
So I think in many ways, yes, I think Bruce is a very overpowering presence. And I think kind of we're always a little bit, not worried is the wrong word, but we were kind of careful not to let him kind of take over the entire show. And I think it was important for us to kind of be present in the film to make an audience aware that there is a distance between the subject and documentary filmmaker, just to make the audience aware that this is not kind of Bruce who's running the show, but there's an objectivity, if you will, in the making of the piece.
But he did, I feel like his design, in visual sense, did influence your visual identity.
I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, I think it would have been awkward for such a designer, to kind of completely go in a different direction when it comes to design. I think it's also his own design, as with many other designers. It's very reflective of his own personality. It's big, it's bold, it's colorful, it's not shy in that sense. So I think that it's full of contradictions, as is he. So I think that yes, I think it did, and I think that for us the biggest kind of, from a design perspective, I think it's a very daunting task to design a film about a designer, of course, because I don't know, there's only things that you can do wrong in that process. But for us, we had a mantra, if you will, which was kind of, we wanted to do a black and white film in color. That's kind of how we saw the film. I think that Bruce, from his dress, from the salt and pepper hair to where he grew up, everything is very black and white. This film could have been black and white. I think there would have been very little difference. So that's how we shot this master interview. That's how we kind of tried to create a kind of a setting for the documentary. That was kind of, from a design perspective, at least from a color perspective, how we approached the film.
But you did, was that intention? You did very elegantly slip into cinema verite in some scenes, and it's a very successful balance. Oftentimes, it can happen that these parts of film would slip. Was this intentional, or is this something that you achieved as you gained his trust, as you became a part of his family, as I see it?
I would have liked to have more similarity in the film. We went on the journey of a different project, which never made it into the film, but that never panned out. So a large part of the film, a large part of what we shot is actually not in the film. I would have, I could have, I think the film could have afforded some more similarity. I think it's, the way we edited it is, these principles, clashing them against his project, kind of against kind of a little bit more of a profiling view of who he is. There's a lot of things going on, so I think it's really about finding the right balance in the film.
So, for me as a filmmaker, I always take something away with me from my protagonist, which sticks with me forever, maybe. What are the key things that how did he change you? Do you feel he's changed you? He's such an inspirational person. He's almost like a prophet. Did he manage to influence you in a way that you think will stick with you?
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, surely. I mean, surely the 24 principles are something that we take into all of our next projects. It's okay, how do we break through the noise? How do we, thinking like you're lost in the forest is obviously, as a documentary filmmaker, it's extremely important insight when you're doing documentary films. It's like this notion of being put in a setting and how do I kind of being so super aware and acutely aware of your surrounding in that moment and just having to kind of being super aware of all of your senses and having to take that into that moment where you press play, where you're recording. I think that's something that obviously that we take away. But I think primarily, I think I'm not the biggest optimist. That's what I tend to not see myself as an optimist. I do think that Bruce like had an insight which I thought was interesting. He said like, I told him like, you're such an optimistic guy, and it's always interesting, I think, to do a film about somebody who sees the world through a very unique kind of prism, and also somebody who is so different to what you are, that you can learn something from him, and you can clash your own ideas against this person. I think so. I don't think I'm the most optimistic person. We were shooting a mastering interview at some point. Like we were talking about this, and he said, "Actually, I think you're super optimistic." I said, "No, I don't think I'm that optimistic." He said, "No, actually, you are, because everyone who creates is optimistic. You know, to the act of creating something, the act of producing something, in and of itself, is an act of optimism." I thought that was actually a very profound insight that I take.
Otherwise, if you don't believe it's going to be done,
then why do it?
Yeah, of course. You've mentioned 24 principles.
Yeah.
This is something that's not per se explicitly explained in the film.
Yeah.
But it's basically, when I was watching, I was thinking, how did this guy do it? Is it a genius? Is this how you were born? And then you work hard. And maybe we cannot understand how he does it in terms of what drives him, where it comes from. But he did sum up the practical steps, and these are the 24 principles,
yeah,
which he published kind of quite recently, right? Can you tell us more about it? I mean, as an audience, just to get, for me, it's a bit of a cheat sheet of how Bruce does things.
Yeah, I mean, so he just brought out a book which is called MC24, which is basically, that's my dog. Yeah. No, I think. So he brought out a book. It's called MC24. It's kind of like, it's all the principles, and it goes into detail, like what they are and how he came to find them, and some of the projects. Yeah, I think that, you know, what's interesting about Bruce is like he grew up in a place that was not only lawless, but he always says there were no rules, there were no boundaries. It was kind of like, you know, he needed a lot of structure in his life. And so one of those things was, you know, like he eats the same thing every day for lunch. He always dresses in black. He always has on the same thing. And so in a way, he tries to find ways to kind of simplify his life, is maybe the wrong word, but he creates kind of boundaries for himself in order to work with them. I think that like it was actually a very cathartic experience, I think, for Bruce as a designer or as an artist or as whatever you want to call him, as a thinker, to kind of create these principles that allow him to kind of show, kind of as a starting point, not an ending point, and he even says in the film, it's kind of a starting point for him to really reimagine, kind of, to like allow people, not only like to allow, it was important for him, but also it's important to allow people access to kind of that world of thinking, you know, that it's not boundless, because you can spend days with Bruce, and you can, you know, and he's full of knowledge, and he's full of ideas, and I think that like to really make it accessible to a wider audience, I think that was very important for me. I think that book is basically like, yeah, I mean, it's his autobiography in a way.
You've mentioned structure, and he needs a strong base,
yeah,
which is understandable for a person who comes from so much chaos.
Yeah.
I mean, he could have gone the other way and have been a chaotic alcoholic for the rest of his life. And one thing which I feel in the film, very present, but it's in the background, is his family. And your family.
Yes.
So So can you tell? His wife is very present. He's not. I feel her presence, but she's not in front of the camera as much. And
like you felt she could have been.
Yeah, she could have been.
Yeah.
But I feel that she's very important in his life.
Yeah.
And he's surrounded by women.
Yeah.
Is this where his strength very much comes from?
Yes, I mean, he grew up, as you saw, in very chaotic surroundings, to say the least. He draws a lot of strength from his 3 children, 3 daughters, and his wife. She's his anchor. He calls her his muse. That's the way he refers to her. And I think eventually Bruce was just traveling a lot. He was constantly somewhere in the world, and I think he just realized that it's a very, very, I mean, he's so in love with her. I mean, there's no other way to put it. I mean, everything, his whole life revolves around her. I think he just wanted her around more, so he started working together with her. He actually left Bruce Mau Design. He started up his own practice, which is called the Massive Change Network, and he gave her a position called the Chief Insights Officer. So she's always around with him. She travels the world with him, and they're kind of a duo now. And every project, from Massive Action to projects at the United Nations that he's doing to a very local project in Philadelphia, wherever he goes, she's there with them. So yeah, definitely.
We can ask the audience if you want to ask some questions. Feel free. Anyone has a question? Okay. One thing which sets Bruce apart, obviously, is this whole philosophy that design is not about the visuals. It's not about the creation of something catchy or beautiful. It's about change, massive change, catalysis of change in society.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, artists actually pull back from this, saying our responsibility is personal process, a project, and then moving on. Is this something that you do agree with? Do agree with Bruce?
In his approach to design?
No, in the approach of what is the responsibility of artists in general. Is it can we be as ambitious as Bruce and say that all arts has this kind of responsibility?
I mean, I'll talk about Bruce before, and then maybe I'll try to come into an answer of my own. But I think that Bruce, like when he speaks about design, he speaks about it as a leadership methodology, which I find very interesting. So his definition of design and his definition of leadership are actually the exact same definition. So the definition for him is, you see something you want to have. It's very simple. You see something that you want to happen in the future, and you systematically execute that vision. So that is, for him, basically the most basic definition of design. You see something that you want to change in the world, or you see something that you want to manifest in the world, and you systematically take the steps to execute on it. And I think, and that's for him, and that's how he defines leadership as well, right? Up to, for him, like a lot of, leadership is very much anecdotal, like what makes a good leader. I mean, for him, he kind of boils it down. So I think that in that, like, I think it's a very, I think that he absolutely didn't answer your question, so let me try again. I think that...
Can we be optimists? Can we say that arts can change things?
I think that Bruce has body of work is proof that it can. I mean, to what degree he actually implements change is something else. I think for him, it's the act of inspiring people to to take action. I think that's how he sees it as well, and I think a lot of artists do as well. I mean, I don't want to judge, you know, about other artists and their. It's very difficult for me. I can just say that I'm inspired by that way of thinking. You know, that I mean, I think for me this film in a way is our film about Bruce, but it's also meant to inspire people to take action. Maybe not in the way that Bruce, you know, sees it, but in the way, you know, on a personal level, you know, I think a lot of people have come up to us and said after the film, like, it was a very inspiring experience for them. They want to, you know, they're going to go off and think about, you know, things that they might do differently in their lives. So I think it was I mean, yeah, of course it's our ambition not to do this film for ourselves, but to do it for an audience that can take something home and do something with the information that they want. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, it's absolutely in line with what you've done. Okay, well, any final thoughts?
No, I don't know. Does anyone have any follow-ups?
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for the festival, for allowing us to show the film.
Thank you a lot.
It was great. Thank you. I know that there's the one subtitle of The Chinese Gentleman wasn't shown, so if anyone has a question about what he said,
So it's time to be optimistic in this.
I think so, yes.
Yeah. So
But
we have
a
to do
fact-based optimism, I think that's the right way to put it. It's not
The bigger the
Pollyanna, it's
challenge.
not, the bigger the challenge, the bigger the opportunity. Or Bruce even says, the bigger the problem, the bigger the opportunity. So I think that's very much an important message for our day-to-day, and I think something that we should all.
Let's close on that. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you, Festival, for having us.